girls. Welcome back to another Sunday with us. Thank you so much for coming. We missed you guys. Hope you had a great and blessed week. Hope you had a good time with your family. Whatever kind of school that you're doing, I hope it went really well. How have you guys been? If you ever want to send a message to us to let us know how you're doing, feel free to let your parents know and they can send us a message through the group chat, okay? Today's story is about God's provision. Have you ever had a time in your life where you've come into a situation and you need something? Money, or food, or clothes, or school supplies, something, and you're just not sure where it's going to come from. So God wants us to be sure that we know He's always going to provide for us. And He talks about that a lot in the Bible. Today's story is about a very large picnic, and it shows exactly how God provides in special ways. Before we get into our story, let's hear a song. It touches a little bit on the story, but it also talks about how God provides. Come on!
Listening to Jesus has been such a treat. There are thousands of people as far as I see, but the only food for miles around has come with me. Just one basket, 2 fish and 5 loaves of barley bread. At the feet of Jesus I lay down to share my basket, and I'm sorry that there's not more there. But Jesus just smiled. I thank you, my child. And lifting up my little lunch began his prayer. For 1 basket, 2 fish and 5 loaves of barley bread. Now the basket was bulging with fish and with bread. Something special happened by the prayer he said. When the dinner was over, our bellies were full. Everyone agreed it was a miracle. For 1 basket, 2 fish and 5 loaves of barley bread. For 1 basket, 200 fish and 500 loaves of barley bread. 1 basket, 2,000 fish and 5,000 loaves of barley bread.
Okay, well, as you might have guessed, our story today is about Jesus feeding the 5,000. If you haven't heard the story, you're in for a treat. Even if you have heard it before, you're going to hear some details that might be a little bit different than what you're used to. It's always exciting. This is what's good to know. No matter how many times you read the Bible, it's a good idea to read it over and over again through the years, because you're actually going to hear things you either don't remember hearing before, or maybe you didn't read it before. And the reason I say that is because, as you'll hear in the story, Jesus feeding the 5,000 is the one miracle that happens in all of the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So in each Gospel, each person is a different person, so they have different memories of what happened, and they might tell it a little bit differently. That's pretty cool. So we get 4 people's perspective on what happened when Jesus fed all these people. All of these people had been listening to Jesus all day long. They couldn't wait to hear the next thing they had to say. They didn't want to miss anything, so they didn't leave to go get food. It probably wasn't a planned get-together. It was probably Jesus had started his day walking around, and then a few people came and listened to him, and then a few more heard about it and came and listened, and a few more until it grew into this big crowd. So of course, because it wasn't planned, people probably didn't pack lunches, right? They were just running to try to hear what Jesus had to say. This is what Jesus wants. God and Jesus, they want us to listen to the words that they had to say for us. They don't say them by accident, and they're precious words. They have a lot to teach us. So let's find out how Jesus provided for all of these people that spent their time doing the most important thing that they could do, which is listening to him.
So here's where we are in the story. After God created the world, and after people messed up the world by sinning, and after God created a rescue plan for his children, and after he sent his son Jesus to earth as a teeny tiny little baby, Jesus was all grown up. He wasn't a teeny tiny little baby anymore. Not that when he was a baby, he was teeny tiny. He wasn't like a miniature sized baby or anything. It's like babies are already teeny tiny. He was a regular sized baby, okay? Anyway, he was all grown up and he was teaching lots and lots of people all over the place. He was teaching them how to love God and how to love people and how to be more like him. This is the story of how one day Jesus was teaching a big crowd of people. On this particular day, the crowd was about 5,000 men. Back then, they only counted the men for some reason. So really, if you counted the women and the children, the crowd would be like 15 or 20,000. And really, we should count the women and the children, especially the children, because in this story, there's even a little boy, and he's a child, so I don't even know why we didn't count him. Anyway, on this particular day, there were lots and lots of thousands of people. Oh, and as a side note, you can read about this story in the Bible, in Matthew 14, or Mark 6, or Luke 9, or John 6. As a side note to that side note, this is the only miracle in the Bible recorded in all 4 Gospels. So that probably means it's super important and we should be able to learn something. Anyway, Jesus had been talking to this huge crowd of people all day long. See, sometimes when Jesus was speaking, people just lost track of time. They couldn't stop listening to Jesus. They wanted to hear everything that he had to say. But come on. All day is a really long time to just sit and listen. And these people were getting hungry. So the disciples went to Jesus and said, "It's getting late. Maybe we should let these people go home so they could get something to eat." But Jesus said, "They don't need to leave to get something to eat. You can give them food to eat." What do you think the disciples were thinking just then? Pardon me, but what food? They didn't bring any food with them. And it's not like there were any restaurants or grocery stores nearby, although that would be pretty neat if there was like a restaurant right there in the side of the hill, right in the middle of all those people. Anyway, the disciples were looking around for some food. Remember that boy I told you about? Turns out this one boy had some food, but it wasn't like a food truck or anything. It was just his own little lunch. 5 pieces of bread and 2 small fish. Definitely not enough to feed a crowd of lots and lots of thousands of people. But Jesus was about to do something amazing. He took the bread and the fish and he thanked God for it. Pretty simple stuff, right? But then he started to split it up and pass it out to everybody. Everybody. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Time out. What the actual crazy do you think was happening inside the disciples' heads just then? What in the world was Jesus even doing? Did he really think that he was going to be able to feed thousands and thousands of people with only 5 pieces of bread and 2 small fish? It must have seemed impossible. But what the disciples didn't know is that when Jesus prayed this prayer of thanks, he was talking to his dad in heaven. And his dad in heaven is God, the one who created all the fish in all the oceans, the one who, at the beginning of time, created everything out of nothing. So making some lunch for some people was no big deal. Actually, it was a big deal because these people would have known the story of the Israelites wandering in the desert really well, and how God had provided for them for 40 years with manna, which is kind of like bread, except it's really small, so it's more like cereal, and it fell from the sky, and boy, that would be super sweet to have like cereal falling from the sky, but it would also freak me out a little bit. And there was also quail when the Israelites were wandering in the desert, and quail are like these tiny little birds. Actually, they're not tiny, they're like regular birds, and birds are already tiny, so they're still tiny, but maybe not as tiny as you would have thought. Anyway, the food that Jesus prayed over and handed out was being passed around, and people were eating, and eating, and eating. And the craziest thing happened. Even though they kept handing out bread, never ran out of bread. And even though they kept handing out fish, they never ran out of fish. All these lots and lots of thousands of people ate as much as they wanted, and there were still leftovers. 12 baskets of leftovers. What? How does that even work when they started with so little? Not only did Jesus feed these people dinner, he gave them more than they needed. Leftovers. When the people saw Jesus do this miracle, some of them were convinced right then and there that he was the king and the rescuer that God had promised so long ago. And while it was probably pretty wild to see Jesus take these 5 pieces of bread and 2 small fish and feed lots and lots of thousands of people, it wasn't crazy at all for Jesus. It was easy.
Our verse today comes from one of the Gospels, the book of John. It says, I am the bread of life. John 6:48. Jesus says these words when, after he fed the 5,000, or the 5,000 families, crowds of people began following him, looking for more bread. We talked about how the original 5,000 were following for his teaching, but these new crowds were maybe hoping to get some free food. He explains that bread alone will not satisfy their deepest need. Rather, they can have eternal life by believing in him. Have you ever gone without eating for a whole day? Our bodies begin to get weak if we don't get food. Food is one of our basic needs. We all must eat to live. In our story today, we learned how Jesus fed 5,000 families. He met their basic need for food. Our Bible verse today really is talking about how Jesus can give something we need even more than food. We need him.